This is a fairly interesting story that I haven't seen anyone talk about. Maybe I'm just not looking in enough corners, but so far I haven't read anyone else discussing this. China on Friday issued sanctions against the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and a Washington based think tank in retaliation for providing a public platform to Taiwan's President Tsai Ing wen during her transit through the U.S. this month. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said the sanctions against the institutions and other individuals served as countermeasures related to Tsai's transit through the U.S. The sanctions come amid heightened concern that China would carry out military provocations around Taiwan, similar to war games it conducted in response to a high-level visit by then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the island in August. Taiwan's defense ministry over recent days has said it is monitoring closely the movements of a Chinese aircraft carrier, naval vessels, and Chinese military aircraft that it says are crossing over into Taiwan's territorial air and sea space. Chinese officials had earlier issued public condemnation and warnings against the U.S. for allowing Tsai's transit and warned of imposing consequences for Tsai's meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in Los Angeles at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library on Wednesday. In disregard of China's repeated representations and firm opposition, the United States allowed Tsai Ing-wen, leader of the Taiwan region, to transit in the U.S. and engage in political activities, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement. The Taiwanese leader made public stops in New York last week and Los Angeles this week, which the Taiwanese government and Biden administration carefully described as transits to fall in line with the unofficial relations maintained between Washington and Taipei. Along with sanctioning the museum, the Chinese government sanctioned its former executive director, John Hubusk, and its current chief administrative officer, Joanne Drake. Ronald Reagan believed passionately in freedom, democracy, and the exchange of ideas, not simply for Americans, but for all people around the globe, said David Trulio, president and CEO of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute, in a statement to The Hill in response to sanctions. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute is proud of its decision to host a bipartisan meeting between members of the United States House of Representatives led by Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, and her delegation. We will not shy away from living up to President Reagan's expectation that the library bearing his name be a dynamic intellectual form. With the meeting, McCarthy became the most senior U.S. official to host a Taiwanese leader on American soil. Tsai also met with a bipartisan delegation of House lawmakers in California. In New York, Tsai also reportedly met with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and a group of bipartisan senators. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also issued sanctions against the Washington-based think tank Hudson Institute for hosting Tsai last week in New York, where she was presented with a Global Leadership Award. Chair of the Hudson Institute Board of Trustees Sarah Mae Stern and John P. Walters, Hudson Institute President and CEO, were also sanctioned by the Chinese. We stand firmly with Taiwan and against the Chinese Communist Party and its ruthless genocidal policies, Walters said in a statement provided by the Hudson Institute. The U.S. has determined that the Chinese government is carrying out a genocide against the Uyghur Muslim population in the northwestern territory of Xinjiang. We were proud to honor Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen last week for her great courage and clear-eyed determination to resist tyranny. The Chinese Communist Party has a long history of attempting to silence voices domestically and abroad that opposes its international aggression, its oppression of the Chinese people, the statement continued. It has not worked before, and it will not work now. We stand firmly with Taiwan and against the CCP and its ruthless genocidal policies. We remain steadfast in promoting the security, freedom, and prosperity of America and its allies. The sanctions imposed via bans on the blacklist organizations and individuals freeze any asset that they may have in China and prohibit Chinese citizens from any interactions. So I'm kind of mixed on this. Like my feelings on it are not entirely clear. Now, Pelosi had a visit to Taiwan that really upset the Chinese government. I thought she was stupid for going over there because I don't understand why you would purposefully stoke conflict with a region that you apparently are trying to not go to war with. But it that situation put me in a position where I was on the side of certain Republicans who were saying it was dumb as well. And now I feel like they're hypocrites because this the Taiwan president met with Republicans and Democrats both here in California and in New York. So basically both parties contributed to meeting with a, because the thing with China is they're trying to say, oh, China is trying to restrict people's free speech. Free speech has consequences. They can't stop the Taiwan president from coming to the US, but they certainly can react to it. And I think that if she had just visited and wasn't hosted by the Reagan Library, didn't meet with the lawmakers, just toured the US like any normal person, it's really hard for me to believe that China would have sanctioned the various people and organizations that it did, especially the Reagan Library. I mean, and I was talking about this in my stream earlier today. I can't think of any instance throughout history, and they've had presidential libraries for roughly what 60, 70 years ever since the Hoover one was created, where a presidential library hosted or did something that upset another country's government so greatly as to have it sanctioned. I can't think of anything like that happening with any library ever. And again, maybe I'm not entirely aware of the histories of the other ones, but somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is unprecedented, and the fact that it's coming from the U.S.'s basically arch nemesis over the library choosing to host individual that the China government does not want us being antagonist, does not want us to engage in political activities with or otherwise have our government officials interact with, because the Reagan Library, like all the other presidential libraries, is a federal building. So her being there and being allowed to speak, or being invited to speak, while also being hosted by these various congressmen and senators, is the U.S. engaging in political activity with her. So they're trying to make it a free speech issue, but it's really just us not acknowledging the one China policy, or kind of like spitting in the face of it.